I still remember the sound of that summer, the sea breathing against the rocks, the wind moving through the curtains of the small house by the shore, and her laughter echoing somewhere between them. Everything smelled of salt and something I can't name anymore. Maybe hope, maybe lies. We were 23, too young to know what forever meant, and too proud to admit we had no idea. She came from the city that year, running away from something she never explained. I was just a local boy who painted boats that weren't mine and read books I didn't understand. She said my hands looked like they belonged to someone who could build a home, and I said her eyes looked like they were always searching for one. That was how it started, simple, clumsy, true. Every morning she walked barefoot down the sand with her hair still wet from the sea, and I waited for her by the pier, pretending I wasn't. She carried a notebook she never let me read, full of sketches and half-written letters. Sometimes she'd stop and write something, her lips moving as if she was whispering to the ocean instead of to herself. When I asked what she wrote, she'd say, "Memories. I don't want to forget how it feels before it ends." I didn't understand that then. I do now. We lived in a loop that didn't need clocks. Breakfast turned into sunlight. Sunlight into her laughter, laughter into silence, silence into skin. At night we'd lie on the roof of the boathouse, counting the same stars every time and pretending they were changing. She'd rest her head on my chest and ask, "If I ever leave, will you still come here?" I laughed once, thinking it was a joke. "You won't leave," I said. But she looked at me like someone who already knew how the story ended. On her last night that summer, the air felt wrong, too still. The sea didn't move, the wind forgot its song. She sat with her notebook open but didn't write. "Promise me something," she said. I told her I'd promise anything. "If I ever disappear," she whispered, "don't come looking for me. Just wait here by the sea. When the wind turns south again, I'll return." It sounded romantic then, like something lovers say in old movies. I kissed her forehead, said, "I'll wait forever if I have to." She smiled, but it was a sad smile, the kind that says, "You already are." The next morning she was gone. No note, no goodbye, just the hollow sound of waves and a piece of red ribbon tied to the pier. The old fisherman said he saw her take the early bus before sunrise, the one that leaves before even the gulls wake up. I ran to the station, but it was too late. Her seat was empty. Only a window left open, curtains moving like they were waving goodbye. I stayed by the sea for weeks after that, like an idiot rehearsing her return. I painted her face on every wall I could find, tried to trap her laughter in glass bottles, whispered her name into the wind until my voice turned hoarse. Everyone in the village told me to move on. But how do you move on from a ghost that still breathes in your chest? Summer ended without her, but I didn't leave. I waited for the wind to turn south again, like she said. It didn't come that year. Or the one after. Still, I waited. I built a life around that waiting, painting, fixing boats, talking to her in my head like she'd gone on a long trip. I grew older, but in my memory she stayed 23. Untouched by time, untouched by regret. One day, 5 years later, a letter came. No return address, no name. Just a single line written in her handwriting, the kind that looked like it wanted to run away from the page. It said, "The wind is coming back." The letter had no scent, no return address, not even a date. Just that one line. "The wind is coming back." I stared at it until my eyes blurred, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something easier to believe. 5 years. 5 years of silence, of nights counting the same stars she once named after her dreams. And suddenly, 7 words decided to wake everything I had buried. That night, the wind did turn. I heard it against the shutters, that southern breath she used to wait for, and my chest tightened like the air itself remembered her. I didn't sleep. I packed a bag without thinking. Paint-stained shirt, notebook, an old photograph of her I had kept in a jar. I didn't even know where I was going. Only that standing still had become unbearable. I took the first bus heading anywhere south, and for the first time in years, I felt both alive and terrified. The city was louder than I remembered. Faces blurred into each other, the sky hidden behind cables and noise. I walked with the letter in my pocket like a pulse I couldn't quiet. I searched for her in every cafe window, in every reflection. Like, Maybe she'd been waiting for me the way I waited for her, but love doesn't wait in the same place for both people. It moves, hides, changes shape. I found her name by accident in an art gallery tucked between two empty buildings. Clara, the wind and the sea, it said on the poster. My heart stopped. I stepped inside. The room was white, too bright, like a dream pretending to be clean. And there she was, hanging on every wall, not her body but her soul. Paintings of the ocean, the pier, the small red ribbon she left behind, the roof where we counted stars. Each brushstroke felt like a confession. Each color felt like a scream she had painted instead of writing me. A woman in her 50s stood by the corner, reading a brochure. I asked her if the artist was here. She said softly, "She passed away 2 years ago." The floor disappeared under me. I didn't even know I had fallen until someone helped me stand. The room spun. 2 years ago, I had been waiting for a ghost. I wanted to shout, to tear the paintings from the walls, to ask how death could send a letter. But grief has its own language. It speaks in silence, in shaking hands, in disbelief that refuses to die. The woman must have seen the ruin in my face because she said, she asked for this exhibition to be held here. She said someone would come for her work one day. Then she handed me a small sealed envelope from her pocket. She told me to give this to him, to the man by the sea. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside, her handwriting again. I painted every memory I had of you so I could finally let them go. But I couldn't finish the last one. The sea wouldn't let me. Come find it. It's waiting. There was an address written at the bottom. It was the same small coastal house we once shared. The same house I had refused to enter since the day she left. I returned that night, the wind howling like a creature that had found its voice again. The house was smaller than I remembered, full of dust and ghosts. The door creaked as if it recognized me. Her scent was gone, but her presence wasn't. I lit a candle and saw the canvas leaning against the wall, covered by a white sheet. My heart pounded as I lifted the cloth. It was unfinished. A portrait of the two of us, sitting on the pier, holding hands under a crimson sunset. But only one figure was complete. Hers. The space beside her, where I should have been, was empty, outlined in faint pencil marks. It was as if she had waited for me to return and fill the void myself. The candle flickered. I sat on the cold floor and traced the outline with my fingers, whispering her name over and over until the walls began to echo it back. And in that echo, I swear I heard her voice, soft, distant, familiar. "You kept your promise." Tears came, the kind that don't fall but burn instead. "You said not to look for you," I whispered. "You lied." No, I could almost hear her say, "I just wanted you to wait until the wind remembered us." I stayed there until morning. The candle had died, the sea outside calm again. I looked at the painting one last time before leaving. And though she wasn't there, I finally felt like she had come back, not to stay, but to say goodbye properly. As I stepped out, the wind turned south again, brushing against my face like a hand I used to know. And for the first time in years, I let her go. Morning came like an intruder, too bright for the house that had chosen to stay dark. The sea outside was calm, pretending nothing had happened. But inside me, everything was still breaking. I spent hours sitting on the floor beside the unfinished painting, staring at the empty space she had left for me as if my absence had been her last act of love. The outline of my body was there, faint pencil lines waiting for color, waiting for me. I wondered if she knew I would come back. I wondered if she painted that outline knowing I'd be the one to complete it. For days, I couldn't move. I just lived in the quiet, in the hum of her ghost that filled the corners. Her brush lay on the table, brittle with dried paint. Her cup of water had turned into dust. I touched her notebooks, dozens of them, and opened one. Inside were small sketches of my hands, my shoulders, the back of my head when I wasn't looking. Notes written in her delicate handwriting. "He doesn't know I'm fading. Not yet. The colors hurt today. I can't see blue anymore." That line gutted me. I turned the page, more drawings, more fragments of truth she'd hidden from me. "The doctor said it's spreading, that I'll lose my sight before the summer ends." I didn't tell him. I couldn't. He loves the sea, and I can't watch it die in his eyes. I dropped the notebook. My breath came in pieces. She had left because she was dying not from heartbreak, not from boredom, but from a disease that was stealing her world one color at a time. She painted her last summer with me, knowing she would soon live in darkness. And she left so I wouldn't have to watch her disappear. I screamed her name into the empty air, but all that answered was the sea, indifferent as always. My tears fell onto the unfinished canvas, staining the outline she left for me. I didn't wipe them away. Maybe they belonged there. Maybe they were part of the painting she couldn't finish. That night, I found another envelope beneath her brushes. A small one. The handwriting was weaker this time. Inside was a note that said, "When you find this, don't mourn me with silence. Paint. Fill what I left empty. That's how you'll know I didn't leave." I only changed shapes. So I did. For 3 days and 3 nights, I painted. I painted until my hands shook, until the candlelight blurred my vision, until the smell of oil and salt water became unbearable. I filled the empty outline with myself, not as I was now, but as I had been when she loved me. Young, foolish, infinite. Every stroke felt like a conversation with her ghost. I told her about the years I spent waiting, about the way I kept hearing her laughter in the wind, about how I hated her for leaving and loved her for it all the same. Sometimes I thought I saw her shadow move across the walls. Once I felt her hand on my shoulder, light, familiar. I didn't turn. I just whispered, "I'm almost done." When I painted the eyes, I hesitated. What color were they now, in her memory? Did she still remember mine when the world turned black for her? I chose the blue of the sea, the same she said she could no longer see. I gave her back the color she had lost. When I finished, dawn was breaking. The 2 figures sat together on the pier, holding hands under a sky that never existed. She was smiling, alive, eternal, and beside her, I was whole again. For the first time, the room didn't feel haunted. It felt inhabited. I stepped back, and something inside me broke and healed all at once. I realized the truth. She didn't ask me to wait for her to return. She asked me to wait until I was ready to let her go. Until I could love her without needing her to exist. I signed the bottom corner beside her initials. Then I opened the windows and let the wind rush in. The curtains flew like wings. The candle went out. And in the flicker of that dying flame, I thought I saw her one last time, smiling, fading, free. That morning, I carried the painting to the pier where we first met. The tide was rising, gentle and cruel. I leaned the canvas against the railing and whispered, "You're home now." The sea wind brushed against my face, warm and soft, the way she used to touch me when words weren't enough. Then I walked away, leaving the painting to the ocean. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The wind was blowing south again. Years passed, but the sea never forgot her name. Every summer, the wind would turn south again, and I would feel it. That same ghostly whisper against my skin, like she was reminding me she still existed somewhere between the waves. I didn't live so much as linger. I grew older, but not wiser. People came and went, but none stayed long enough to understand why my eyes always searched the horizon. I had learned to smile like someone keeping a secret. The house by the shore aged with me. The salt ate through the wood. The paint peeled off the walls, and the windows stopped closing all the way. I didn't fix them. Let the wind in, I thought. Let her in. The painting was gone. Taken by the tide that morning, I left it on the pier. I used to dream that someone would find it, maybe washed ashore miles away, half destroyed but still holding her face. Then one autumn morning, someone knocked on my door. It was a fisherman, soaked and silent, holding something wrapped in a torn sail. "We found this tangled in the nets," he said. "Figured it belonged to you." When he opened the cloth, I saw it. Our painting. Time had ruined it beautifully. The sea had swallowed the colors, softened the lines, erased my half completely. Only she remained. Her smile blurred, her body dissolved into waves, her eyes faint but alive. It looked less like a portrait now, and more like a memory the ocean had decided to keep. I took it in my hands and felt the salt still wet on its surface. She had come back just as she promised. Not as flesh. As proof. That night I couldn't sleep. I lit every candle I had and stared at what was left of us. I traced her fading face with my finger, and for the first time I didn't cry. The grief had changed shape, quiet now, like an old song that no longer hurts but never really ends. I realized something then. She had never wanted me to wait for her to return. She wanted me to learn how to love something I couldn't keep. At dawn, I carried the painting back to the sea. The sky was the same color as the day she left, that soft, impossible gray that hides both beginnings and endings. I waded into the water until it reached my chest. The cold bit into me, but I didn't flinch. I held the canvas up to the horizon and whispered, "You can have it back." The tide pulled, gentle at first, then stronger. The waves caught it, lifted it, carried it farther and farther away until it was nothing more than a small red smear against the vast blue. The same color as the ribbon she tied to the pier all those years ago. I stayed there for a long time, the water moving around me like breath. The sun rose, slow and cruel, and painted the surface gold. Somewhere beneath it, she was still there. Maybe not her body, not her voice, but something of her that refused to vanish completely. Love doesn't disappear. It just changes address. When I finally walked back to shore, the house looked different. Smaller, lighter. I noticed her notebook still lying on the table, pages untouched since the day I found it. I opened it one last time, and there, between two blank pages, was something I had never seen before, a photograph of us. I didn't even remember it being taken. We were laughing, eyes squinted against the sun, her head tilted toward mine. On the back, in her handwriting, it said, "If you're reading this, it means I made it to the wind." I smiled through tears. I didn't fight this time. I looked toward the sea and whispered, "You made it." That night, I left the window open. The wind came in, carrying the smell of salt and paint and something softer, like her perfume. I didn't reach for it. I just lay there, eyes open, letting it move through me. And in that half-dream between waking and sleep, I heard her laugh again, faint but real, like the sound of a wave touching the shore for the first time in years. She didn't return to me. She didn't have to. She had already turned into everything I loved about the world. The sea, the wind, the silence after her name. I am old now. The kind of old that makes you part of the furniture of your own house. The sea still roars outside, but I no longer rise to meet it. My steps have grown quiet, like I'm trying not to disturb the ghosts that live here. Everything smells faintly of salt and thyme. The brushes have hardened. The paint has dried in its jars, and the chair where she used to sit creaks when no one touches it. I think the house remembers her better than I do. Every morning I sit by the window and watch the tide breathe in and out. Sometimes I talk to her aloud. The words don't matter. The sea answers in its own language. The villagers still nod at me when they pass. They call me the painter of the wind. They tell stories to their children about the woman who disappeared and the man who waited forever. I don't correct them. My truth wouldn't fit inside their words anyway. There's a picture of her on the wall, the only one that survived the salt and the years. She's smiling, eyes full of light, unaware of the darkness waiting ahead. Sometimes I stare at it so long I start to imagine her blinking. Once I thought I heard her laugh behind me, and I turned so fast my knees almost gave out. There was no one there, of course. Just the wind, slipping through the cracks, smelling like the first summer again. I keep a notebook now, like she once did. My handwriting trembles, but I fill the pages anyway, letters to her, to the sea, to the parts of myself that still ache. I tell her about the seasons she's missed, about the gulls that learn to steal bread from tourists, about how the sea has moved closer each year, as if trying to claim me too. I tell her I'm not afraid. Not anymore. I waited for her long enough to understand that some love stories don't end. They just grow quiet. Last night, the wind changed. It came from the south, gentle but insistent, the way it used to when she arrived. It pressed against the walls, rattled the window like a familiar knock. I couldn't sleep. My heart felt like it was waking up after years of pretending. I lit a candle and sat at the table, the same spot where she once painted. The flame flickered, throwing shadows across the room, and for a moment, I saw her again barefoot, hair damp, notebook in hand, smiling as if she had simply stepped outside and come back. "Clara," I whispered, afraid the sound of her name would break the spell. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence filled itself with everything she never got to say. I opened my notebook to the last page and began to write. If you ever find this, wherever you are, know that I waited. Not because I was trapped, but because waiting was how I loved you. I stayed until the sea remembered our story, until the wind learned your name again. I am tired now, but it's the good kind of tired, the kind that comes after keeping a promise. The candle burned lower. My hand trembled, the ink blotting into tiny galaxies. I closed the notebook and left it on the table beside the photograph. Then I stood, slowly, painfully, and walked outside. The night was calm, the moon silver and shy. The sea shimmered under it, endless and kind. I walked barefoot to the pier. Every step was a conversation with memory. The boards creaked like the years we shared. The wind brushed against me like her touch. When I reached the end, I looked out over the water and smiled. "The wind is back," I whispered, and then I saw her. Not a ghost, not an illusion. Just her shape in the mist, standing where the sea met the sky, her hair moving like a flame that refused to die. She didn't speak, didn't need to. She simply opened her arms, and for the first time in decades, I felt young again. I took a step forward, then another. The boards groaned beneath me. The wind howled. The sea rose to meet me. The cold hit like a memory, sharp, clean, absolute. I closed my eyes, and everything I had carried began to fade. The pain, the years, the loneliness. All that remained was her laughter, the smell of paint, and the sound of waves crashing against eternity. When the villagers found the pier the next morning, they said the old man must have slipped into the sea. They found his notebook, soaked but still legible, and a line written in shaky ink. She waited for me every summer, until I finally came home. No one ever found the body. Some say the sea took him. Others say the wind carried him away. But the fishermen swear that when the tide turns south and the air smells like rain, you can see two figures standing at the edge of the water, hand in hand, watching the horizon, forever young, forever waiting for the next beginning.